Hey friends, it's Jay. Welcome back to another video. Thank you so much for being here. Today, I am not going to be chatting about any of the current astro weather, but instead, I'm going to share with you just a brief overview of a timing technique that I really love to use in my astrology practice and in my own life. It is called Annual Profections. It is this ancient timing technique. I think it's so fabulous. I'm a super big fan. You might have heard me talk about Annual Perfections before, whether it's on Instagram, maybe in my newsletter, perhaps on the podcast. And I do also offer Annual Perfection readings. So be sure to check out jasminesastrology.com for more on that. But yeah, for anybody that might not know what annual perfections are or that needs a little bit of a refresher, annual perfections are an ancient timing technique that states that every year of life is going to be associated with one of the 12 houses in the birth chart. So, with every birthday, we enter a new perfection year where one house in the chart and all of the topics and relationships that that house governs become the major focus for that year. And the planet that rules that house also becomes what's known as your perfected time lord, basically your guiding planet for the year ahead. So, within this technique, every year of life activates one house and one planet, and the perfection year will last from birthday to birthday, creating this highly personalized 12-month cycle. And that's part of what I love about annual perfections so much is that they really help to simplify what transits are going to be really worth paying super close attention to. Because you could have dozens of transits happening at any given time throughout a year, and knowing about each of them can be really helpful to a point, but I think being able to narrow the focus with our transits is really beneficial for being able to actually connect that much deeper with the astrology that is at play specifically for each of us. Now, I used the term activate, and I want to go back to that for just a minute. So, just like with life, where certain aspects or areas or relationships aren't always in focus throughout the entirety of our lives. We might have some years where traveling just really isn't a big part of that year. And then we'll have other years where we take a really big trip or we take a couple of really big trips. Traveling, that was a year that I traveled a lot, but whereas many other years I'm not traveling at all. Or, there are going to be times in life where there are several years where our living situation really stays pretty much the same. And then we might have a year where we move a bunch of times, or we decide to buy a house, or we do a renovation or something like that. There's a year where our living situation really comes into much greater focus. And the same goes for the astrology chart. Not all houses and all house topics or planets and their significations are going to be activated at all times. There are going to be years that feel particularly Venusian, and then other years that feel a lot more mercurial in nature. And I think this idea of certain houses in the chart being activated at certain times is, where I think this can sort of help us with, because sometimes when the current conversation about the current astrological weather is so dominated by a particular aspect or transit, and yet we don't really feel it coming to life in our own lives. And that's, probably because it's not interacting with our charts in any significant way. And it's maybe outside of that zone of what's really being activated for us. Now, of course, there will be, major life themes that are going to be active for quite long periods, or something that is always true for us as we move through life. And that's also going to be reflected in the birth chart, of course. But I really think no one year is ever quite the same. And annual perfections, the way I like to think about it is that they really show us when the planetary promises that are encoded within our birth chart, when they are actually going to come to life and really be in focus for us. Now, I'm going to talk a little bit about the 12th house profection year that I am currently wrapping up to kind of help illustrate just how annual perfections really work. But first, I just want to show you a couple of like charts and diagrams to get this a little more visually clear for everyone. So first, this is just a diagram of the houses, and yeah, this is just basically to illustrate for those who might be unfamiliar with the idea that the birth chart contains these houses, and that houses have particular topics and themes and relationships that fall within each of them. So, just a quick look here at a chart of the houses with all the key words and all of those different significations. And so you'll see that, pretty much anything you can think of within the life is going to fall within one of these 12 houses. And of course, this is just basic keywords, so you could go so much deeper with each of them. Okay, so next up, I'll show the annual perfections wheel. And this is how you determine which house is becoming activated for you. So it is all based on age. So we can see that, the ascendant, so the first house, is going to be activated in that first year of life. But, you put the age of 0 because you haven't turned 1 yet. So the ascendant, the first house, activated at the age of 0, then again at the age of 12, then again at 24. And so you just go around the chart basically. So second house becomes activated when you are 1 year old. Third house becomes activated when you are 2, and so on and so forth. If you have any questions about how to read the annual perfections wheel, please absolutely let me know in the comments. Now, next up, I will bring up, this is actually my natal chart, and I thought I would bring it up just to show a couple of examples. So let me bring up some tools here just so I can highlight some stuff. So the last time that, sorry, I'm still getting used to all these tools here. Let's see if I can make that better. Apologies for the delay. Okay, so yeah, the last time I was in a 4th house year, which if you remember back to the houses chart, the 4th house does signify things like living situation, home, family, all of that kind of thing. And the last time I was in a 4th house perfection, I moved from a different city back to the city that I was, well, not born in, but the city that I spent a good chunk of my life in. So I moved, my living situation changed. And my parents also got divorced that year. And so just a lot of stuff with family happening in that 4th house perfection. And then the last time that I was in a 7th house perfection, which does have to do with relationships and committed partnerships, that was a year that I got engaged. And spoiler alert, we are still engaged several years later. But, that's not always going to be the case for people. We're really not the marrying kind, I guess, but we like being engaged. Anyways, the last time that I was in a 9th house perfection, which does signify things like higher education, travel, publishing. Astrology can fit into the ninth house. And the last time I was in a ninth house profection is when I really got serious about studying astrology, and I enrolled in several programs and yeah, took it to sort of the next level. And so, like I said, I'm going to be talking about the 12th house perfection that I am currently wrapping up. And so, because I am wrapping up a 12th house perfection, that does mean that I am moving into a first house perfection. So, yeah, I'm going to be looking to the first house pretty soon. But I'm going to now chat with you about this 12th house perfection that I was just going through. Yeah. So, the significations of the 12th house, just briefly: isolation, solitude, retreat, loss, illness, illness usually related to a more mental health situation, or like a sort of like a spiritual crisis, if that makes sense. Behind the scenes work, the subconscious, restoration, hidden enemies, and self undoing. So always a party in the 12th house. Although, to be quite honest, I really did for real come to appreciate this space and this house, and even really actually form quite a love for the 12th house over the last 12 months, which isn't all that surprising because my 12th house is Libra, and so therefore it is ruled by Venus. And just like with everyday transits, the ones that do feature our benefic planets, so Venus and Jupiter, those aspects always tend to be a little easier or a little more beneficial. And the same goes for perfections. So actually, to go back to my chart as an example, that fourth house here, which is Aquarius, ruled by Saturn. And my Saturn is in Sag, which I do kind of feel is like an uplifting Saturn placement because it is ruled by Jupiter. So I think I had a mix of both, because Saturn is a malefic planet, so it would indicate a year that has more challenges. But I do wonder how much of that Saturn placement in a Jupiter ruled sign mitigated that a little bit. And so I moved into a much better living situation, but also my parents got divorced. So, kind of up and down. Yeah. So back to the 12th house, Libra, Venus ruled. But regardless of that Venus rulership, bringing perhaps a little bit more beneficence to the situation, I knew going into the 12th house year that this was probably going to, indicate some challenges ahead. I knew there could potentially be some experiences that would require maybe a bit of separation or isolation to really process things. That alone time was probably going to be pretty normal, but also probably really helpful and healing. And, I can't make it up. I kicked off this solar year sick with COVID. So illness, check. Isolation, check. About a month later, I lost one of my dogs. And I have spent the better part of this solar year navigating an unknown illness. And it is, astrologer good that it would be an illness that I still have really no answers about, because it's a 12th house thing. It's hidden. The ascendant, the first house that really does represent you, doesn't see that 12th house. And so the fact that it is an illness that is still so hidden to me makes perfect sense. It sucks as a human. It's great to see as an astrologer. Now, it is a physical illness that I'm navigating, but it has without a doubt had an impact on my mental health, which would fit more into that 12th house space. Though I don't think the two can really be separated, right? Like, I think our mental health and our physical health are really one and the same. And I'll go back to my chart for just 1 second, but we can see that in my 12th house, that's where Mars is. And so that's going to be ruling over my 6th house, where we do find physical illness. So, and And I'll talk more about that later, but as in addition to the planet that rules your perfected house coming into focus, any planets in the perfected house will also be highlighted to an extent. And so, yeah, Mars in the 12th, ruling over the 1st, ruling over the 6th, bringing in that physical illness as well. Also, the 6th house does signify small animals. So there you have it. But going back to the mental health side of things, this was also the year that I finally found a therapist who I really enjoy working with. You know, I'd been in therapy sort of on and off before, but nothing that really stuck because I couldn't build that relationship. Um, I couldn't build that like connection, I guess. And this was the year that I found the right person to do that with. And so, you know, Libra, relationships, the other, Venus, relationships, connection, building bonds. And so, you know, something clicked for me in that area this year, and it's become a regular part of my life. Now, I do think that therapy could probably be found in a couple of different places in the chart, 12th house for sure, 8th house, even 7th house. But what makes this especially interesting to me is the fact that my 12th house ruler, Venus, is in my natal 2nd house of money and resources. So, you know, I started spending more money on my mental health, investing resources into that 12th house space. So that's another facet, right? Like with Venus being activated, I knew that its natal position was going to be important as well. So I was also prepared for my resources, my income, my values to be part of the story of this solar year. And not only that, like not only taking into account the natal position of Venus, I knew it was also important to pay special attention to transiting Venus and any transits that were also going to move through my 12th house. So I knew right away Libra season was going to be a big time. I knew that the South Node moving into Libra back in July was going to be a big deal, and that the Venus retrograde happening this past summer was going to be particularly potent for me, given that Venus is my perfected or my guiding planet for this solar year. And without a doubt, the Venus retrograde has been the most embodied experience for me in terms of astrology throughout this entire year. And I would say with, you know, the Libra season stuff and the eclipses coming in at a close second, but that Venus retrograde was absolutely front and center for me. Now I'm still unpacking a lot of what that retrograde really brought me, but my perspectives on the way that we engage and relate to each other, relational dynamics, that's all really shifted for me, as have some of my values or the way that I see what is valuable. You know, self-worth and self-love were really such big themes for me. And even though I did come out as non-binary before the retrograde started, and it was just a little bit before Venus moved into Leo, it wasn't really until moving through the retrograde period itself that I really came to sit with what it meant to come out as non-binary, what it meant to share that piece of me, and just how much it had truly shifted relationships and, you know, relationships with both myself and others and what I really value. So that played a really big role in that. And just to stay on that piece for a moment, you know, the 12th house, as I've mentioned, can be the place of self-undoing. And one of the delineations that I have heard for so long about people who have their ascendant ruler in the 12th house, which, as I mentioned, I do. I have that Mars in the 12th house, which rules over the 1st house as well as the 6th house. But people who have their ascendant ruler in the 12th house, that we can often be our own worst enemy, that often we are the only ones really standing in our own way. And I find it so interesting that with this year of the 12th house activation, one of the biggest lessons for me has been that the 12th house is really the undoing of the self that isn't even real. It's the self that needs cleansing. It's the stripping away of layers and masks, which, the South Node in Libra has also been part of this perfection year, as I mentioned. So that is another layer of starting to purge old ways. And an astrologer who I really admire, Diana Rose Harper, on Threads, she really said it best. And I'm paraphrasing here, but she was talking about the 12th house and saying, when the self is in need of undoing, it's actually a liberation. And so, yeah, going back to the fact that my ascendant ruler is in the 12th house, I think it just makes this 12th house perfection year that much more potent, just given that it's also activating the planet that more than any other in the chart really represents me. Now, going back to the idea that, or part of the theory, part of the technique that the planets in the perfected house will also be highlighted, at least to an extent. I would definitely say that the planet that rules the house is going to be the most important, but you also don't want to sleep on the planets that are in that house. And I've definitely seen how Mars has pulled in both the first house and sixth house significations to this year. But I also have Mercury in the 12th house, and Mercury rules over my 11th house of friends, networks, groups, and my 8th house of death, debt, inheritances. It's another hidden sort of shadowy area of the chart. And, Mercury also rules over the degree of my MC, which has a lot to do with career. And, this was the year that I got a website for my astrology business, and I started doing more podcasts and more videos. So communication in general, right? I've invested a lot of energy into my business. I've also really gotten back into journaling, and I really see journaling as a Mercury in the 12th house kind of thing. It might also be Mercury in the third because it's a very daily activity, but there's something so private about journaling that I really feel like it's like a 12th house thing. But yeah, in general, I would definitely say that I've always been a person who needs a lot of alone time and space to decompress after social interactions. But this 12th house perfection really emphasized those feelings and just gave me such a much better understanding of all of that. Like, just a deeper, more embodied connection with those themes and with that energy. I feel much more in touch with the 12th house space. And it was an area of the chart that really used to unsettle me, and it still does a little bit. It's not super fun to have your ascendant ruler in that hidden space. I'm sure there's going to be plenty more challenges with that and plenty more lessons that arise in that area of life, but I definitely feel different about it on this other side of things, so to speak. So I really just wanted to share part of my personal story to illustrate how powerful our perfections and understanding our perfection years can really be. Knowing where to channel the energy, where to allow yourself to really focus in. I think that makes such a difference to how you spend your solar year and how you can contextualize things and really make sense of it, really, understand the quality of time that you're moving through. And honestly, what I've presented here is really just the beginning. You can go so much deeper with the annual perfections technique, and you can lay on other timing techniques. And, I'm just really now getting into using the solar return alongside annual perfections. And something quick to start with there, if you're interested, would be to pull up your solar perfection or excuse me, your solar return for the coming year and take a look at the condition of your upcoming perfected planet to get kind of a feel or like another layer of how things might play out for you. So for example, Venus, the ruler of my 12th house perfection, in my solar return chart was in Scorpio in the 5th house. And I really thought that that spoke so much to the challenging yet overall hopeful year that I've really had, because Venus in Scorpio is in its place of detriment. So it's not as it's just not as happy when it's in Scorpio. Or I don't even know if I should say that. I think it's just that it's not as well resourced as it could be in another sign. It's not as able to express itself as purely as it might be in another place in the chart. And yet, Venus loves to be in the fifth house. That is where it finds its joy. And so, that was kind of that mixed bag energy, which I was also feeling from the 12th house being a difficult house, but Venus being a benefic planet and not a challenging planet. So there was that. Venus in that solar return chart was in a trine with Neptune in the ninth house, which I thought brought a lot of the spiritual and philosophical qualities and components that my year has really had. And the way that I have really been applying all of this to astrology, again, astrology being found in that ninth house. You can also break down your profection year into profection months, which is kind of cool. So I'll stick with the example of the year that I've been moving through. My birthday. So on my birthday, when I moved into that 12th house profection, I also began a 12th house month. And then 1 month from there, I would have moved into a first house month. And then a month from there into a second house month, and so on and so forth. So that's just another layer that you can add as you're moving through the year. And I think that one kind of comes, all of these layers come after the first one, the perfection year being the first thing, because you can get so much from that. You don't have to layer in anything else to really get something really rich and powerful from perfections, but it is cool how you can start to layer in different timing techniques and such. So, yeah, this is just really an overview, something to hopefully get you excited about annual perfections. Maybe you can start applying the technique to whatever perfection year you might be in right now. And I would love to hear in the comments if you feel up to sharing, like, what perfection year you're in. So, like, what house is activated, what planet is activated, how have you been seeing that come to life for you? And yeah, so let me know in the comments. And like I said up front, I do offer annual perfection readings. So if you're interested, there will be a link in the show notes. You can also check out the Cosmic Map Coven for monthly forecasts, zodiac sign deep dives, monthly meetups, early access to content like this. And yeah, thank you so much for watching, everyone. I hope you're excited about perfections. Absolutely let me know if you have any questions about any of the material that I brought up. I hope I didn't get too personal, but I feel like, as astrologers, we should be okay sharing our personal charts. And like, there's so much that we can impart through sharing our own experiences. So, yeah, thanks for being here. I will see you soon. But until next time, I'll catch you in the cosmos.